Toronto Maple Leafs trade talks continue to escalate as new rumors have surfaced surrounding the Toronto Maple Leafs and a star. So we're going to break down who that player is and discuss what this can mean going forward for the Leafs as the trade deadline inches closer. Stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we get into it, quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. If you're a part of the 70% who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Leafs news. All right, Darius, there's a lot to go over today, and a lot of reports are circulating. Obviously, the Leafs coming off of a massive overtime win against the Edmonton Oilers. It's now back-to-back overtime wins, and amidst all this, the Leafs are actually sitting pretty good right now in the standings, but that's not stopping trade talks from escalating, and there are some holes, you could say, for this team, that at least areas they can improve, and trade talks are starting to pick up, and I want to give some context before we get into the actual report. So, a couple days ago, the Penguins, specifically, a league source told a reporter earlier this week that Kyle Dubas has made it known to other teams that everyone is available except 87, of course, Sidney Crosby. And again, that is, a bunch of Penguins trades have already, a couple of them have already went down, and one big one, and specifically regarding Lars Eller. But Darius, this has started to circulate now, and among, specifically regarding the Leafs, with the Penguins potentially beginning a fire sale, Evgeni Malkin could be someone the Leafs inquire about. And that obviously came from a reporter. And then there's been a bunch of rumors going around that the Leafs should be pursuing some of the Penguins players. Now, obviously, there is the relationship there between Kyle Dubas, between the Toronto Maple Leafs. But what are your thoughts on the idea of Evgeni Malkin, or at least someone from the Pittsburgh Penguins, getting traded to the Leafs, given their, I think at this point, the Leafs definitely need to make a move at this deadline, specifically regarding the bottom six. What are your thoughts on Evgeni Malkin here? Probably factor in, obviously, to the top six, but you move everybody down.
I think the only thing the Leafs are missing in terms of forwards right now is a third line center, or at least another natural center, whether you want to put him on the second line and whatever happens with Tavares at that point. But they're missing a natural center. So if you're looking at the Pittsburgh Penguins, obviously Sidney Crosby is not going anywhere. There's just no way. But in terms of the structure of the team, they have to start a full-on rebuild right now. Like, there's just no way that team can go any further. And obviously, there's a lot to be made out of, no movement clauses, and Malkin has that. Letang, everybody in Pittsburgh has that, right? So it's going to be hard. They're going to have to agree to a trade. But I wonder if another shot at a Stanley Cup would intrigue a guy like Evgeni Malkin to come to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I think there's going to have to be some, a lot of work done in a trade between the Leafs and the Penguins if it is Malkin, because there's going to have to be retained salary. And the Penguins are in a tricky situation right now where they can't really retain any more salary because they're doing that with Riley Smith and a buyout and all this. So if you look at their Puckpedia, it's a bit of a mess in that regard, but they're going to have to get creative with it. But I think in the NHL, if you want to get something done, you can get it done. It just depends if Kyle Dubas wants to trade with his former team. And this would free up about $5 million for the Pittsburgh Penguins right now, which is something they could desperately use, as well as draft picks. And if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, if Evgeni Malkin is available, that really gives you a three-headed monster up the middle and would make you very hard to play in the playoffs. And it would have to be retained salary. And Malkin is signed one more year, so you would get him next year as well, but it would be a hefty trade. I'm thinking maybe Nick Robertson's involved, maybe a couple draft picks. It would have to be first-round draft picks. But I think if a player like this becomes available and Pittsburgh's willing and Malkin's willing, I think you have to try and go get him.
Yeah, and as you read the report regarding the Penguins, you can see this here towards the second half of the second paragraph. While Dubas has done well to replenish the pool with picks and prospects over the past year, the objective of any near future moves wouldn't be to add more futures. Rather, it would be to acquire actual players back, since it isn't a tear it down to the studs rebuild yet. So he remains committed trying to, build a team. And that would fit perfectly into a guy like, of course, we'll get into his cap hit in a minute, but a guy like Nick Robertson, who again would be a young player that they can use to add and to hope, again, you look at these stats and you're saying, wow, what a horrific season. And quite frankly, it's not as bad as it looks on the surface here, but it hasn't been a great season, especially if you're trying to build a value for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And this isn't to say that Nick Robertson in itself would be enough to headline an Evgeni Malkin deal, but if they're looking for young assets to kind of have and to help build around Sidney Crosby to a degree, at least retool, Nick Robertson could be a decent starting point. And again, they have some other prospects that are near NHL ready. Now, I'm not saying they should go out and they should trade any of the crazy prospects. Now, whether that's, the classic Fraser Minton, maybe they could, get interesting with a Fraser Minton, Easton Cowan. I don't think Easton Cowan's available in any trade talks, 50-game point streak. But Fraser Minton, like maybe a Nicholas Robertson, a Fraser Minton package, and maybe throw a pick in there. Guys who are at the AHL level who aren't quite, at least there isn't quite room for them yet with the Maple Leafs. I think Nick Robertson here could fit, especially given the fact that this report and all things are indicating that they want maybe a mix of NHL-ready players and picks. They've already got some picks back in the Lars Eller move. So it'll be interesting.
I think the Penguins they do want futures, but I think that they need NHL players as well, which is why I bring up Nick Robertson because he hasn't been performing so far this year. I mean, 1 point in 16 games. Yeah, 16 games. It hasn't been great for him. And of course, I've been defending him all season long. I think that, he has been playing good. It's just been unlucky for him. But the fact of the matter is, you have to put up more points. And if you look at Evgeni Malkin, he's leading the Pittsburgh Penguins in points. He's almost a point a game player this season. So he would definitely help, especially if you put him on the third line on the Leafs. That would be insane. That would be a really great play there. But there's going to be a lot of, having to get creative with a deal like this. Maybe Fraser Minten, right? Like, I think if you're getting Malkin for a playoff run this year and you get to retain him next year at a retained salary, I think you'd have to make a lot of the salary work. Like, you have to give up a couple guys. This would really change the makeup of the team a little bit. Like, you'd have to give up some significant salary as well. But, I think the Penguins are looking at like who can play in the NHL right now. Nick Robertson can do that. I feel like Kyle Dubas loves him. I feel like Robertson would play fantastic with a guy like Sidney Crosby. Like, that would be a crazy dynamic as well. And then they probably want futures. You got to give up a draft pick. It's probably a high draft pick, maybe Fraser Minten, like you mentioned, right? But I think you go out and do that because you're in a win now window. Like, you have to win right now. This is what True Living has built this team for. So I think if he is available and he's willing to come to Toronto, Nick Robertson, he's on the table. High draft pick, it's on the table. Even Fraser Minten, it's on the table because he would really help you to win right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think any deal involving Evgeni Malkin would definitely need more than Nick Robertson. He is only on that 1 year deal. So, I mean, maybe you put an extension in place depending on how things go. But it's interesting. And again, you look at his cap at $6.1 million. Retaining salary would have to happen from the Penguins front to make this work. And again, their current cap space, it would save them. It'll be interesting to see what would actually happen. But he can still play. And you look at it, 4 points, 7 shots. Like, this was in a very recent game. And the best game of the hockey Malkin has played this decade. So, again, ultimately, he's a phenomenal player. Nick Robertson, on the other hand, is off to a bit of a slower start, but he's a younger asset. His cap hit's only $875,000. The biggest thing would be, I think there would have to be some sort of NHL-ready prospect, though, in this deal, simply because otherwise the Penguins, they're not going to give him up for nothing, especially with the way that the culture and everything that he's built and done for this the franchise and the Penguins. But he is 38 years old, and you would have him for 1 more year, so you'd have him into your age 40 season. But I guess the question here is that, I guess the point for it, you already have a guy like Chris Tanev. You have a guy like OEL. You're not necessarily a super young team, at least in this, this scene of like winning right now. But Darius, this would be one of the more exciting moves. But again, I'm sure a lot of fans out there are already commenting, he's 38 years old. Don't give up a ton of picks or prospects for him. I probably tend to agree. I don't know if it gets done mainly because of the Dubas thing, but any final thoughts on this? It would be intriguing to say the least, and it's funny because it is really exactly what the Leafs need, a veteran guy to play. Now, whether he'd play on the third line, the second line, who even knows, because the lines are shifting every day. We still don't even, I lean towards, this is a conversation for another day, splitting up Marner and Matthews once Matthews returns, so who knows how the lines are going to get going regardless in that front. But Evgeni Malkin would definitely, I think they'd put this team over the top, and that's what they need. But any final thoughts for wrap up?
Yeah, definitely would put them over the top. They need a natural center at third line, and Evgeni Malkin would be fantastic on the third line. He can score, he can defend to a certain degree, but obviously he's an experienced guy. He knows what it takes to win. He's getting older. Yes, that's true, but the Leafs are in like a 3-year window, I think, right now. So you'd have him for 2, right? Or at least half of this season, I guess, a year and a half. So that could really help you win. I think it's something that the Leafs should definitely take a look at if he's willing to come to Toronto, if Dubas is willing to trade him here. And the last thing I'll mention too is with last night's game, with Bobby McMahon, that kind of resurgence, if he continues to play that way, it doesn't look like Nick Robertson's going to touch the top 6. And I think that was the plan originally. And then he might lose his spot to Pacioretty when he comes back. So it's an interesting dynamic. I think that the Leafs might be okay losing a player like this if you can add a player who can help you win, like Evgeni Malkin. Like, he would really put this team over the top.
Yeah, I mean, Pacioretty's been playing very well. Bobby McMahon's been playing very well. And even guys like David Kampf have been playing very well. So obviously David Kampf's a center, Nick Robertson's a forward, but there's not much room for Nick Robertson if once everybody gets healthy. So, and Connor Dewar as well, he's back. So there's a lot of things going on there. But let us know down below what your thoughts are on this. Would you entertain a trade around Evgeni Malkin for, it's going to be Nick Robertson plus, but let us know down below what your thoughts are. We'll see you later.